quite seeing all. Okay,
Thank you. Keep talking.
I'm trying to understand the basic shapes and I'm challenged by getting them on paper.
Okay, well, thank you for talking. Here we go. Good morning, everybody. This is the carnation and how to paint the carnation. I've done them in 3 different ways, and I hope I'll answer all your concerns about making the carnation. Okay, here we go. Here's paper that's the same kind of paper that I used before. And we'll do this one first, okay? And I'm using my Lowe brush. I wet my brush and I dry my brush. And it's going to be a little wetter than most of the other versions, okay? And dip it into my small companion colors here. And you can have some plates ready to mix with. I like to use small mixing bowls. Okay. And you can use 2 different tones, but you don't have to. You just use 1 tone of red, and that's perfectly fine. Okay. What you really need to do is to know the shape that you want your flower to be when it's done. Okay. And in this case, it's a little bit of an oval. All right, so I'm going to take my hand and I'm going to sketch out an oval shape like that. And then I'm going to fill it up. So I'm just going to take my hand and I'm just going to kind of squiggle in a few shapes here. And at the very top, my petals are deckled, so they're uneven. They're like serrated, right? Like a serrated knife. So I've opened up my brush. Can you see my brush like that? I've opened it up, and I'm going to just tap some in. Like that. Okay. Take another brush because I want to keep my colors, and I'm going to paint the stem and the calyx. Okay, so I'm mixing green, and you could add a little yellow if you want your stem to be a warmish green. And blend it. And you can take some dark green and some black. This is the larger companion colors. If you're using the small companion colors, you can just use green and yellow and black. And get a medium consistency here. Right, and we want to paint the calyx off. So the calyx is a big calyx. And we press here, and it's like square shaped. And I'm just putting my brush down on the paper and letting the paper absorb the paint. Like that. And then when I'm happy with the calyx, I lift my brush up to straight up and down. And I pull a stem. And there's my carnation. All right, to get this shape, all of these petals here, these are like a big crinoline for weddings. You know, when girl wears a ball gown, she has to have all these crinolines in. So that's what it looks like to me. I'm going to take a brownish color and then add some blue, and that'll give me like a purplish tone that I did for this one. Okay. And I'm just going to go in and define the petals a little bit. And wiggle your brush like you have an unsteady hand to give you that shape of the deckled or the serrated edge. And I noticed that my flower here needs a little bit more ovalness instead of being so round. I'm going to paint in a few more for here. I'm going to let those dry a bit. Okay, so there's one way of painting your carnation. And if you want, you can go in with a little bit of veining too, because some carnations have a bit of texture to them. And in between here, you can, where you have the white space, you can go back in with your red, get the red a little darker, make it a maroon tone, maybe mix it with a little bit of black. And paint that in to look like the shadow of the petals behind. Okay, so that's one. I'm going to do the next kind. Okay, so the next one I'm going to do is this kind here, which will have more petals. So here's my example. Lots and lots and lots of spiky petals. And to get that, I first have to do some side strokes. So I'm going to load my brush with a light tone and then tip it with a darker color. And I'm going to make it less wet than I did this one. Okay. So I dip my brush to my water, I wet my brush, I dry my brush, I clean my brush off. And right here at the heel of the brush is where it's going to be the lighter tone. And so I've dried that off. I've actually squeezed that out here with my paper towel. And this part is where I'm going to have the color. So let's use maybe a little purple. So you can see I just put my tip into color. And take my plate and I'm going to blend it in my plate, make sure I have enough wetness. So there you go. And it helps if I have another piece of paper to test to make sure that my strokes are going to be good. So if you are working on your masterpiece, have an extra practice piece of paper. This is just for demonstration, so I can practice over here. I lay my brush down to being almost horizontal, and I put it down and I do side to side strokes like that, like a windshield wiper. And if I can't get them moving this way, I'll roll it. Okay. And I do another layer, rolling like that. Okay. So now I'm happy with those. Let's go. Wet my brush. Get rid of the excess. Okay. Dry my brush off. Squeeze out that middle a little bit. Lay it down on the paper. In this shape, I want to be more like a fan shape, folding fan. So here, folding fan shape. Put my brush down. Make my shapes. Do 2 rows of them maybe. Overlap them. I don't want them to be exactly the same. Okay. Then I take the same brush, or I can take a detail brush if I want, and dip it into the purple. And this time I want that purple to be nice and concentrated. Right? And it would help too if I could wait to paint in my defining petals. Whoops, sorry. Because it's demo, I don't have the opportunity to do that. So remember, these are lots and lots of petals. So that's what we're going to do, nice spiky petals. And we're going to start where I think it's the center. So here's where I think it's the center. These petals are the inside petals. Those are the outside ones. I'm just going to make lines like that. And if I run out of color, and go back in and load up my brush again, more color. So each one of these would be a petal. So I want to make sure that coming off of a petal. Last week we did the pine tree, so it's very similar to the pine needles, right? Hold your brush straight up and down and have a piston action. You don't want to bend your wrist. Keep your wrist straight. Okay, that's where the calyx would be. Maintain that shape. Now you can even add a few reddish ones. Come back in, change the color. Okay. Go back with my green color. Do the same thing that I did for the other flower. Green colors. And if I want to paint the calyx, I can paint the calyx. If I don't, if I think the calyx, this is bent, so I can't see a calyx, I can leave the calyx out. But here, I'm just going to have a little bit of the bottom of the calyx. We're going to think that it might be up there, right? Up into the flower because it's bent a different way. And there's your carnation. Okay. Next one. Pause. Okay, here's the third one. This one has more contrast than the others. You see, I have very light pink tones here. I have warmer tones on the outside. These are cooler tones. Use my same brush. I'm going to clean my brushes off. And because you are not doing a demo, you can clean your water source off too, whereas I'm using a little bit of dirty water. So your painting should come out nice and crisp and clear. All right. So we look at these strokes here, and you're going to create them with the brush tip facing down, because the tone, the darker tone is here, the lighter tone is there. All right, like that. So I wet my brush, I dry my brush, and I'm going to use this one. So most of my brush will be water, and then I'm going to use a little bit of red, tip it to red, and then for texture, I'm going to use a little bit of black, and that's black watercolor. Okay. And I hold my brush this way instead of that way, remember? Okay. And I'm going to paint where I think the center of the flower would be, and that would be there. Hold my brush down. And you see how this becomes round if I hold my brush down and I just stamp it. So instead of being round, I want it to be a little bit more serrated at the edge. So I put my brush down and I'm going to pull. And you can see how I'm getting more sharp edges by doing that. Put my brush down and pull. Load it again. Come back in here. And I pull. And if I want it to be really pointed at the edge, I'm going to bring my brush like that. I'm not moving my wrist. See how I'm leaving my wrist straight, but I'm moving my whole shoulder like that. Okay. Here. If I want it spiky like that. Just another row. Spiky. And now that I have my basic shape, I can go back in and create other layers. Okay. I'm going to take my other brush. You can use just one brush, but I'm going to switch brushes because I have two brushes. And I'm going to do the calyx. And this time I'm going to show you how to paint leaves. Paint the calyx just like the other one. And pull. And the leaves are on either side. So remember I said it looked like an onion because this whole area is the leaf, and then it comes out and expresses itself with these thin little leaves like that. And they can even curl. Okay. And there's your 3 types of carnations.
Thank you.